Thank you for your attendance this morning. The methodology would be as imparted yesterday with regard to questions, etc., as per the Select Committee briefing. We now enter in session 5, and it's a Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning, Homes and Communities, i.e. Homelessness, Plan for Homes and Associated Initiatives, Tackling Poverty, Child Poverty, Council Discretionary Welfare Funds, and in attendance with Councillor Rebecca Smith, Anthony Payne, Paul Barnard, Giles Perrott and Matt Garrett regard to support. If I could ask Councillor Smith if you could open, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. As you all know, it's been an incredibly challenging year for housing delivery in the city, with the combination of Brexit, COVID, high inflation, high mortgage rates, cost of living pressures, as well as some of the wider macroeconomic and demographic uncertainties that the country is facing. Nevertheless, I'm pleased to report that I've continued the commitment to the Plan for Homes programme, which continues to take an innovative and proactive approach in driving housing delivery. Since it was launched in November 2013, the Plan for Homes programme has been taken forward by both Labour and Conservative administrations. And the results of this continuous programme are impressive, with 7,717 new homes built, a total of 1,867 affordable homes, 259 social rent homes and 644 low-cost ownership properties, with 27 wheelchair units having been delivered. And during this time, we've also brought 385 long-term empty properties back into use. We are now 8 years into the 20 years of the Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan, and I'm pleased to say that because of our proactive planning and enabling work, we have delivered a total of 11,107 homes. We continue to have more than a 5-year land supply and continue to pass the government's housing delivery test. As of April 2022, there were 13,863 dwellings with planning permission in the JLP area, and 1,514 of these were under construction. That means that 94% of the housing requirement set out in the JLP has already either been delivered, is under construction, or already has planning permission. Overall, therefore, we can be pleased with the progress we have made against our strategic housing commitments for the city and the wider housing market area. Equally, though, we cannot be complacent. I believe we need to make the most of the new powers and planning reforms coming forward under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill before Parliament at the moment. We are now making good progress with Homes England, who are very committed to developing a strategic place-based partnership with the City Council to realise many city centre and other housing opportunities around Plymouth. And I also believe we need to make more use of our own City Council land and buildings to help deliver much-needing homes. Although under Plan for Homes, we have already released 50 council-owned sites and delivered over 1,000 homes to date on this land, I have nevertheless instigated a strategic land review to identify further housing opportunities. Officers will be presenting the conclusion of the strategic land review to me next month, and I very much hope that this will allow us to build a strong pipeline for affordable housing delivery for the next 5 years. So I'd like to briefly set out some of our achievements during this year on housing, if I may. We have secured nearly £2.5 million from the government's Land Release Fund and the Brownfield Land Release Fund, which will help de-risk the delivery of 15 city council-owned sites by paying for their demolition and other abnormal delivery costs. And I can confirm that we will be bidding for the next round of the Brownfield Land Release funding in the next couple of months too. On estate regeneration, we are actively working with Plymouth Community Homes to complete the regeneration of North Prospect and with Sanctuary and Clarion in Barnbarton on a total investment programme to transform these priority neighbourhoods, estimated at a total of £400 million. We continue to work with the Plymouth Housing Development Partnership to maximise opportunities for housing investment in the city, and in particular with Plymouth Community Homes and Live West, both of which we have housing partnership agreements to lever increased investment for new affordable homes in the city. And I've actually met with that group to enable them to hear from me and for me to hear from them as well, which was incredibly helpful. Having secured planning permission and appointed a local builder, we are now on site at our Broadland Green scheme in Plymouth to deliver 10 sustainable homes. And this is the first delivery directly by the City Council for 40 years and something that we hope to replicate elsewhere. The first homes have been completed at Stirling House in Honicknoll, which has seen 9 service veterans in housing need involved in the construction of 25 self-contained affordable homes to rent, with up to 12 of the homes being lived in by the veterans themselves, and that's scheduled to be completed by September. Lastly, I cannot say too much about this for commercial confidentiality reasons, but we are very close to securing the funding and sealing the deal on the acquisition of 86 family homes for affordable housing, which will make a massive contribution to meeting the needs of many families in housing need in the city, and I hope to make a more detailed announcement on this next month. The key focus for me with housing now is moving forward building a pipeline for future delivery under the Plans for Homes programme. There have been severe challenges affecting housing delivery over the past couple of years, and it is likely that these will continue for the next 18 months at least, due to wider macroeconomic factors outside of our control. They will place inevitably downward pressure on home building output across the whole country in the short term, particularly on previously developed land in low-value areas such as Plymouth. And indeed, it was many of these circumstances that led to the Plan for Homes in the first place as an integrated delivery programme some 10 years ago. As I said earlier, we are currently working on a number of pipeline sites that we think could deliver nearly 3,000 dwellings in the city, of which 58% will be affordable. There are a lot more things we are doing to stimulate development, but I just briefly want to touch on what we're doing with homelessness as well, because I realise that that is a big challenge for us. As I've already said, we're in the grip of a number of factors that are having an impact on our homelessness numbers over what has been one of the most challenging times we have seen in local government. The financial impact and recovery from this will need a medium to long-term plan before we return to pre-COVID-19, and that's what we've been working on in the last 12 months. Associated factors such as cost of living challenges, relationship breakdown, impact on physical and mental health, and increased utility costs are putting a huge strain on households in this city. And a further challenge as a result of the pandemic is the availability of affordable private rented sector accommodation, as house prices and rental costs have increased across the southwest, and actually as landlords are leaving the profession and we're seeing an increasing number of houses taken off that private rented market. Essentially, Plymouth's housing market has never looked like it's looking at the moment in recent years, so we are dealing with unprecedented changes and challenges, which therefore means that demand for services inevitably continues to increase. The number of households in bed and breakfast and the number of households in other forms of temporary accommodation have been rising, which has put significant strain on both budgets and services. However, we are continuing to work closely with our partners, including the Plymouth Alliance, to look at new and innovative ways to mitigate these rises, but there are inevitable pressures on the budget that we have to recognise. We've been working hard with partners across the council and the wider city to look at alternative forms of temporary accommodation to not only reduce the numbers in emergency accommodation, but to improve the standard of accommodation offered. And I have to say that often it's with tough times that improvements come, isn't it? And I think although we've had a horrible situation, the stock that we have is going to be in a much better position as a result of that work. Over the last 2 years, we've increased family temporary accommodation units from 23 to 111. This has seen a decrease in the use of bed and breakfast for families. We continue to bid for money to support this work and have been successful in gaining over £5.4 million in additional funding. And we've worked with the Plymouth Alliance to fund our increases to homelessness prevention, which is also key. I'm pleased to say that whilst we asked for growth of £1 million, the council has been able to respond and commit an additional £500,000 into next year's budget. I need to be clear that this is not without significant challenge. However, I am confident this budget can service the work we need it to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that synopsis. At this point, I'd like Mary would like to register an interest. If we could note that, please.
Can I just register a personal interest? I have a family member that works for Plymouth Community Homes. It's been mentioned.
And also, can I register the fact that I'm on the board of Plymouth Community Homes? Thank you.
I did mention yesterday that I was trustee of Bath, which is part of the Alliance.
Okay, I open the floor up to questions now, please, from the panel. Councillor Kelly, would you like to go ahead first, please?
Thank you, Chair. Morning to everybody. Homelessness is an issue throughout the country. It's very much in many people's minds a barometer of a city, how prosperous it is, and clearly, it's quite distressing when you see a number of people on the streets. The government, the Conservative government, did give significant monies, and I know Plymouth was a recipient of a huge chunk of money, Councillor Smith. Can you sort of confirm where that money went and what it did? Because very much the government's drive was to eradicate homelessness to all intents and purposes, but you're saying that it's growing, and perhaps you could give the figures as to how many technically we have got homeless and what that trend is and what the forecast for next year is likely to be and what budget pressure that will induce, please.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Kelly. I think it's worth just being really clear at this point that there's two challenges within homelessness. You've touched on rough sleeping. The main thrust of what I was talking about was homelessness, which is where people are made homeless from a property. So you've got two challenges and two totally different pots of money to deal with that. You were initially talking about the rough sleeper initiative. So obviously during COVID, the government had an everybody in policy, which was where additional funding was delivered to ensure that no one was on the streets. Post-COVID, that has ended. So that is obviously something that we have to work with because people have gone back out onto the streets. So in terms of the Rough Sleeping Initiative grant, this year we've successfully bid for a 3-year grant to tackle rough sleeping in the city to a total of £4.2 million from the government. And that gives us a significant chunk, that's over £1.5 million over a 3-year process to be spending. And that funding allows the delivery of a multi-agency rough sleeper team, which I'm sure you know exists across the city, providing specialist outreach, intensive support to those at risk or actually rough sleeping at the moment. A specialist complex needs safeguarding specialist post, because again, these individuals have complex needs and it affects different parts of their life. And outreach support to support the sustainment of tenancies, because obviously we do try and house them where possible. The winter night shelter continues to deliver 12 safe units of emergency accommodation for those rough sleeping, and 17 units of temporary supported accommodation, including 5 that are female only, are being delivered. And that funding essentially enables us to create individual plans for each of those men and women that we need to support. So that money has continued. There's also, given the financial pressures that we've got as a council, been an additional £121,000 that we've recently received to top up that as well, to enable us to continue working on that. So in terms of the rough sleeping, that's what we've been working on, and that continues to be something that we will work very hard on. In terms of the homelessness piece, I'm not quite sure what the question was about homelessness though there, because the initial thrust of the comment was about rough sleeping. So if there's further information you want to know on homelessness,
I'll clarify that then. So you're quite correct, there's two elements, but the public perception of homelessness is very much, you don't know until you see somebody in a doorway, and there's a lot more people in doorways. We were given additional monies for homelessness, which should have been adequate to make a real dent in people that were in that situation. So my question was very simple, which was, what were the numbers last year? What are the numbers now and the forecast? And how will that impact on the budget, which we're here to discuss? Because clearly that is one of the pressures that you've alluded to. We've had government funding, so was that sufficient to do what was needed to do, or have we got a bigger demand and therefore we're having to use our own sort of PCC monies that are allocated to it? And have you put any more in, or are you taking some out because you feel that the issue is declining? Hopefully that is clear enough, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the numbers on the street, I'm just going to get Matt to refer to those, sorry.
Sorry, you just asked, that was the rough sleeping element. I'm now asking about the homelessness element.
Right, yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. The So it's worth just really clarifying for anybody watching that the rough sleeping number is very different to the people that are in temporary accommodation. And I still think the question wasn't entirely setting that out. So I'm going to tell you what we've got in terms of homeless accommodation, which is not rough sleepers. So this is two completely different challenges. So the number of households accommodated in temporary accommodation at the moment is, as of January, is 376. That is a decrease month on month since October, because we are doing significant work to work with families at risk of homelessness and to ensure that they are housed in accommodation. Those numbers are the numbers that are high because of the additional factors relating to the private rented sector. So that's why those numbers are higher, because people are selling properties, there's a release of accommodation and people are being made homeless because their tenancy has ended. This is not about the rough sleeping numbers. And then the number of households in bed and breakfast at the moment is 181 as a particular form of temporary accommodation. But again, that is decreasing on a month-on-month basis because the team are working with the money that we have got in the budget to deal with that. Now, at the moment, month 9, we're £950,000 overspent because of those pressures, which we've been really clear about. However, we're getting an additional £500,000, and we're also maximising grants that we receive from central government, not the Rough Sleeper Initiative, this is different monies, to ensure that we improve services and get those families into houses. But that's why I'm so excited about that 86 properties that we're likely to be getting, because that is 86 families that otherwise would be in temporary accommodation or homeless, who we're going to be able to house on a more permanent basis. So we're doing an incredible amount of work. If someone comes to us and says, I want to buy some houses, we literally bite their hand off to provide us with that temporary accommodation. And that has happened consistently over the course of this year as well. So that's an example of what the team are doing to maximise the accommodation available. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lugger.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry about that. Good morning, Councillor Smith. You referred in the opening gambit of your speech about reusing empty properties. Indeed, that is admirable. Are you able to sort of quantify, for the purpose of the committee, the net saving by recycling property, which is clearly cheaper than sourcing other? Thank you.
So the blunt answer to your question would be probably not, because there's individual situations depending around each of those properties, although Matt might or Paul might come in with a different figure.
No, I don't think, Chair, we have a figure specifically for that, but clearly any empty home is a wasted resource, and therefore bringing that back into use, particularly long-term empty homes, not only meets a housing need, but as you say, ultimately, in the round, will save money. But I don't think there's a specific cost or that we've ever sought to work out what the budget saving of that would be.
What I'll just add, though, is one of the things when I became portfolio holder that I looked at was what are some of the other ways we can bring properties back in and work on that again. So we write to empty homeowners every year to see if they are prepared to actually put their house back into circulation. And we've done that a couple of times this year, and we've used different opportunities to flag that, to actually tell these landowners, we've got a housing problem, you could help be this part of the solution. And obviously we can't force people to sell their house or to do it up, but where we can, we will proactively work. And there's been examples this year of the council doing that and bringing homes back into use for families in the city.
Just to follow up on that, Rebecca, Councillor Smith, is there any financial incentives for landlords to bring these properties back into use from the council perspective, and with implications on the budget, please?
So we have a team that work on this in terms of the finances side on that. Again, we don't know how many of those properties it's going to be on a year-by-year basis, because we literally do write. There's about 600, I think, at the moment. We'll write to them on an annual basis. If they come to us, we will work with them. But to be able to quantify that on an exact number is tricky, because it depends how many respond at any given time. But when we do work on that, that is within the budget, and Paul can give a bit more info on that.
Yeah, there is budgetary provision within the Planned Homes programme for bringing empty properties back into use, and as Councillor Smith says, obviously relates to the specific challenges of long-term empty properties, some of which will have obviously been long-term and empty for a whole variety of reasons, and which will have their own sort of challenges. But we do provide funding through the Planned Homes programme.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Lang, please.
Excuse me. Yeah, mine is on homelessness too. I think the homelessness system is creaking on all fronts at the moment, and on the council website, the local housing allowance for 3 bedrooms is 69312. Is that right? So I did a search on Rightmove this morning, and there's not a single property that you would be able to get for that. I know I've got somebody I'm assisting who's somebody who's been in the private rented sector with a particular landlord for about 10 years, because I think mainly because of the Liz Truss's disastrous mini budget, that landlord is selling that property. She's now coming back into a private rented sector where she simply is not going to be able to afford to have a home for her and her 2 children. And I guess the knock-on effect of that is she's going to end up in temporary accommodation. And it's a story we're hearing over and over again. And it won't surprise you to know, I'm concerned about the adults in that situation, but I'm particularly concerned about the number of children in that situation. So I just wondered, on the local housing allowance, what lobbying have you done or the council done to speak to government to say, if 693 quid a month isn't going to get you a suitable, decent family property in Plymouth, what are you going to do about it? Are we pushing on a review of that, and what work have you done on that? Thank you.
I mean, the short answer, Councillor Lang, is yes. Raising the HLA or the LHA, sorry, I always get my initials wrong. The local housing allowance is something that's in our offers and asks. That is a consistent ask of government, because clearly that isn't keeping up with the cost of properties at the moment. And the story that you've just shared is something that I see with my residents. I've literally just picked up a case yesterday that's exactly the same. And it's deeply frustrating, because I know that that's feeding directly into the numbers of people that are in temporary accommodation. And having worked in that team a long time ago, the last thing you want to see is people in temporary accommodation, because it's unstable, it's who wants to have that sort of lack of security? And particularly, as you know, I agree with you, that issue for children. What I would just say is we've worked incredibly hard to bring down the numbers of families with children who are in temporary accommodation. That's a real priority for us. And I mean, in terms of the numbers, that in October, there were 64 households with children or expected children in B&B. That's down to 20 now. So that's a reduction of 2/3 in 4 months, because the team are working as much as possible. And again, I take it back to that 86 houses that we're going to have released for families in a nice part of the city that they might want to live in. That's the sort of thing that we've been working incredibly hard on to tackle that, because you know me and you know that it distresses me as much as it distresses you.
Supplementary, Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all that work that's going on, but that is what I've just described is a serious problem, and I guess I want some reassurance around the budget in terms of, I think we're going to see this increase, these no-fault evictions, people coming back into the private rent sector they haven't been in for a long time. They've had an affordable rent, and now it's completely out of their budget. So some reassurance about what you're projecting forward in terms of how these no-fault evictions are going to affect the budget.
I mean, that's kind of why we put the ask in for the million, because that's what we think is going to be needed to deal with that based on our current figures. However, because of the work that we're doing, we are confident that plus additional grant money will help us going forward. The team are going to keep doing what they are doing already. And I mean, the challenge with this, unlike some of the other areas, is that it's not a fixed budget area, so we don't know what it's going to cost us, but we are fully aware that that is going to be a pressure next year, and we'll be doing all that we can to make sure that that money is there to provide for those families and individuals, so single person households as well, to make sure that they've got somewhere to live.
Councillor Lang, just to follow that, I don't know whether you want to work up a recommendation on that for consideration tomorrow.
Around the local housing allowance.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Poyser.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Councillor Smith. Thank you for your excellent overview. That's very useful. Really pleased you mentioned the good work of the Alliance, which also came up in yesterday's adult social care session as well. a group of organisations that have come together doing really good work within the city, delivering fantastic services with some cost savings they've delivered over time as well. We did learn yesterday that the budget or the funding that's been granted to them by the council isn't in line with inflation. I was just wondering what the impact that might have on delivery of those services, and whether what discussions have been had about what that impact might be with the alliance.
So, yeah, the alliance is obviously what you have is the council's funding goes directly to them to deliver for us. In terms of that inflation challenge,
Yeah.
we
Do you want me to come
yeah, can Matt come in on that?
So I suppose it's about thinking about funding in totality. So the RSI funding that's already been spoken about is in addition to the money that we give the Alliance, and then the Alliance are working on a set of plans to just change how they deliver work. So the whole point of the Alliance, and we also have Changing Futures funding, which is supporting them to look at how they deliver services going forward, and within that there will be ways that they can save money and deliver services differently to people. So it's kind of a mixture of council budget, getting in additional funding that can deliver other stuff, and then changing how we deliver services moving forward to help those be cheaper.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a risk associated with the other funding not coming in to still deliver those services. I'm just concerned about what the overall impact it might still deliver on delivery of those services. We did learn, we actually put forward a potential recommendation list about learning from the Alliance and how we could apply that elsewhere to other service delivery, those kind of models where we're working together with the sort of third sector, CIC sector for delivery. So really keen to try and support these initiatives because I think they deliver so much more. So just concerned about the non-inflationary rise might have an impact, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. So you're right, additional money is never guaranteed. RSI is 3 years, so we've got this year and another 2. Changing Futures is another 2 years. The Homelessness Grant Prevention Fund, that is 2 years. So we've been working, so homelessness funding has always been very, very short term. It's always been year on year. We have been pushing the government for the last few years, and every meeting I'm in, I'm telling them we need longer term funding. That's starting to happen. So like I say, 3 years, 2 years, you're starting to see, and that enables us to work very differently with organisations such as the 8 that are in the Alliance to just change how we deliver services, and that's the need going forward. Is we have to transform this. The Changing Futures programme is about working with lived experience, really hearing what it is they need from services, and then changing our services in the way they deliver.
And just to say, in terms of the Alliance, we essentially set that up to help us deliver the work. So they will do what we need them to do. So clearly, if there are budget constraints, that's going to have an impact on that. But as Matt said, you know, the funding that we've got going forward is really significant, and the government does keep giving us additional grant money. But in the nature of grant money, it doesn't come with a huge forward plan, which means we are on that year-to-year basis. But the Alliance have been working under that model with us since they were set up, so that's not a change in that respect.
Councillor Coker.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm sure you're going to be expecting my question anyway. We talked about the JLP and the new homes target. It's really good, I think, in the first part of the JLP that we pushed ahead because, as you say, Brexit and other issues have actually reduced that to a crawl. And it was nice to note that you, not nice, but recognise the fact that that's not going to improve in the next 12 to 18 months. One of the issues, Rebecca, is when you go around Plymouth, there are lots of buildings that could provide homes. In old buildings, I've got numerous ones in my ward that are bought up by developers. Nothing's done with them. They put the building up for sale again to try and offload it. What kind of conversations have you had with Homes England and other agencies? Because this is not a unique problem to Plymouth. This is a unique problem around the country. We're all sat saying we need new homes, we need new accommodation, and yet we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of buildings in the in cities up and down the country that are just not being targeted.
No, that's a really excellent question, and like you, I see that potential all over the city as well. And when you look at it hand in hand with the homelessness figures, clearly it's frustrating. I think we've got to welcome things like what's happening in Debenhams in the city centre. Homes England are incredibly keen on the regeneration of the city centre and putting homes in there, which I know is cross-party interest in that, and I'm a big believer that is what we need to look at, is how do we redevelop the city centre. So Homes England, I know, are in conversations with us around that already. They've also been working increasingly closely with us on the brownfield side of things as well, because obviously one of the challenges we have in Plymouth is with buildings like that, often there's viability challenges, and that's why they sit empty for so long. We've also got lots of sites where demolition has already taken place, but the land's contaminated, etc. I don't need to rehearse that to you. But what we have been doing is having conversations with some of those landowners, and also developers who are keen to use some of our estate to look at homes as well. So I'm actually in a meeting next week about one of those, particularly, so our own surplus estate, looking particularly at Midland House and Windsor House. There's work in train to look at how can we take those key buildings that in the current climate aren't likely to be reutilised as office space to create homes using some really innovative climate processes to ensure that we can efficiently convert those properties, because again, office blocks don't necessarily lend themselves directly to that. But I actually think what we've got in the pipeline will be very exciting in terms of us doing something that hasn't been done in many other places, but bring into use those huge buildings for potentially health related accommodation, temporary accommodation, but also more long-term accommodation in the city centre. So that's just one example. I won't give too many others, but what I will say is this is exactly the sort of thing that I've been working on this year, that lateral thinking. How can we look differently at the land and the buildings that are available in the city to utilise them, recognising that by doing that, we also increase the look, the feel, the setup of our city.
Is there a supplementary there?
Yeah, it's encouraging to hear you talk about that. The plan for homes initially was a cross-party initiative. I really would ask you to consider a working party on these buildings so that we can all work together to actually highlight the issue even more, because when we started the plan for homes, because it was cross-party, we got a lot more bang for our buck. So I would ask you to really consider that, because there is a lot of anger in communities where buildings, and as you know, once they go into a state of disrepair, antisocial behaviour and all sorts of happenings happen there. So I would ask you to consider that.
I think that's a great idea. What we have done this year is start the pipeline, which actually gets us to a position where a working group would probably be really helpful. We've done some of the groundwork on some of these ideas, and I think that's something we should actively take forward in the next couple of months, because clearly members like you have a huge amount of expertise as well, and I think to bring that together a little bit. But what I would say is I think we've just got to that point where we've got some options, and I think by bringing that to a cross-party group would be really sensible, because I've also got some ideas of where we've got our land that we could do some more direct delivery so that we actually get the homes that we want, rather than selling off a massive piece of land and a developer puts what they think is most lucrative for them there.
Could I just ask officers and members alike if we can just be careful with the use of acronyms in regard to the public viewing, obviously the JLP, Joint Local Plan, etc. Councillor Lowry, please.
Thank you. We've got the joys of the poacher turned gamekeeper now, I'm afraid, because
Oh,
the plan for homes that you refer to was something that I initiated back in 2013, and just for the record, it wasn't cross-party at the time. It's subsequently become cross-party going forward, and I would agree that that's the approach we should take. But let's be honest with ourselves now, because there's no point to sort of put lipstick on the pig here, because, you know, the reality of the situation is waiting lists have gone up 20%, okay? Mortgage rates are going up, rents are going up, the availability of homes is going down, start-ups are going down, the number of completions are going down, the contribution to council tax is going down, the new homes bonus is going down, and you said it's a difficult job. I get that, but that's what we get paid to do, difficult jobs. All the easy jobs are done by others behind us and not in this room. And what I've heard today is some good stuff, but it strikes me as slightly aspirational. I've done the dance with Homes England. We've talked about delivery of 10 new homes, 10 new homes. Forgive me, we've been talking about those homes for at least 5 years. We finally got there. Well done for getting there. And you've talked about a number of initiatives that you're looking to bring forward. And I'm pleased that you're saying that, but it seems a bit late, if I'm honest. You know, we should have been talking about Midland House 12 months ago. We should have been talking about Windsor House 12 months ago. And you should now be delivering a plan for housing in this city. So I am, sadly, not pleased about what I hear today. I want to see more because, you know, 180 completions is not good enough. And I know it's difficult, but it's got to change. And it's not going to change if we do what you propose to deliver here today. There needs to be a step change. Because if we don't, our economy will suffer as a consequence. Our finances of this council will suffer, and so will all our residents. So for me, I'm sorry to say I'm not happy, enough's not being done. And there needs to be a step change from your department, some reconfiguration, bring new partners in, find new ways of doing stuff. But unless we start building homes, this city is not going to grow. So I'm happy to hear your response.
Well, thank you, Councillor Lowry. I mean, you won't be surprised to hear that I agree with you, and you know, I think it's worth just. I'm quite happy to say I agree with you. The last thing I want is to see us not building enough homes in the city. And you know, I've been in post for 9 months, and that's what we've been working on. And okay, a lot of it is aspirational, but as has been described, we've come out of that situation where, through no fault of the council or developers in this city, we've not had those numbers increasing at the rate that we want. Now, in terms of the dwelling starts, I do think it is just worth tracking. I mean, I'm not going to show you this diagram because it won't show up on the webcam. But yes, we are at the lowest, but we've been on a downward trajectory since 2018, and we saw a nearly 2/3 drop between 2018 and 2020. So actually, this, in one sense, I should be delivering not just the 10, I should be delivering 500 that had already been set in train 4 years ago. So I think we're all responsible to a certain extent, but I agree, I am the cabinet member who is getting paid to do this, and I'm not shirking that responsibility. However, what we do have is a situation in the city where we get homes built quicker than other places do when they're happening. So for example, from planning permission to starting on site, on average, it takes 2.25 years in Plymouth. Well, let's just rewind. Where were we 2.25 years? We were in the middle of a pandemic. You know, I managed to renovate a house during that time. That's because I did all the work myself, not because I paid many other people to help me. The national average is 3.5 years. So we are already delivering houses quicker than other like-for-like areas. But the key thing in all of this, given COVID and that low drop in numbers, is the pipeline. And so actually what we've done is we've focused on where have we got those sites and who can we be having those proactive conversations with. And I haven't spelt them all out today because there are far too many. And I'm happy to have a conversation offline about that. But, you know, Coy Paul is moving forward, which is Homes England. Brownfield needs a lot of work doing to it. We've got... obviously, the Broadlands Garden is only 10, but that is still something to be celebrated. We've got a whole raft of sites across the city that the team are continually working with. PCH, Plymouth Community Homes, Live West. We've got Bath Street. We've got all of these developments happening. But as I've just said, from planning permission to start on site takes time, but that pipeline exists, and I am confident that that number will go up, and that is the work we've done in the last 9 months, because I don't unfortunately have a magic wand that can speed that up and suddenly get the breeze blocks and the cement and whatever it takes on site, but I can guarantee that that pipeline work has been happening astutely behind the scenes, and I'm confident that we will see those numbers increase, but those external factors have had a massive impact. But it definitely, you know, I am, as you know, 100% committed to housing. I mean, housing actually excites me. I think it probably excites you. You know, I'm in this because it's what I want to make a difference on, but I'm finding that that does take time by the nature of the beast. So that probably isn't going to satisfy you, but that is my response to your point.
Chair, could I just add, clearly there is a time lag between when sites are released and when the houses are actually built and occupied. That's the reality of the need for planning permission and construction timeframes. And I don't think anyone could suggest that in the last 2 years we have been in unprecedented times with huge challenges, global macroeconomic challenges, as well as the ongoing local challenges we face around viability issues on sites in Plymouth. We can't lose sight of that. But I mean, if we look at the national position and look at Plymouth's family group, 14 cities, only 2 of those cities, you won't be surprised to hear where they are, in the southeast, only 2 of those cities have not seen a reduction in their housing output. Starts nationally are projected to fall by 38% next year, and Plymouth's fall in the number of starts, which has been highlighted, is mid-table compared to the others. Some of those authorities have seen well over 100% reductions in their delivery. So there is a context to this, but one of the successes, as has also been touched upon, one of the successes of Plan for Homes was its multi-layered, multifaceted approach, backed up by a consensus that was built around what the intervention should be, and that has got traction with government in terms of aligning funding. You heard from the Chief Exec earlier in the week that she personally is working with Homes England to get that strategic place-based partnership going forward. So one of the things that we're seeking to persuade Homes England to do is to have a proactive approach to site acquisitions, which speaks to Councillor Coker's point about trying to unlock some of those opportunities. So I think it's a fair challenge, but I think we are being proactive in trying to drive that agenda forward, recognising the scale of the ongoing scale of housing need that this city faces.
Is there a supplementary question, please?
Kind of, Chair. I respect the work that officers and Councillor Smith are trying to do and the passion that you have for this. And Mr. Barnard, in response to your comments, I'm not particularly interested in what anybody else is doing. What I'm really interested in is what Plymouth's doing and how Plymouth's performing. And the fact is, I'm talking to people, as Councillor Lang just set out, literally have nowhere to live. That's not good enough for us, is it? That's really not good of us. So we've got to find a way to step up to the plate. And I get it's difficult. We've got children's services demands, we've got adult social care demands, we've got economic development demands, but housing does not get the significance in this council it should get, and it needs to be raised up the agenda, both politically and sort of managerially. So it's on the agenda of the Chief Executive. So we are providing homes to the people who need them, because we're not doing it at the moment, and it's getting worse. And it's only going to get worse unless we behave differently. So we have a recommendation that we set out earlier on, or yesterday, in respect of homes, about finding a mechanism to assist in providing more homes in this city. And we've not agreed specifically what that recommendation is, and I'm sure we're happy as a committee to debate that, but it is about increasing the pipeline significantly, because what we've got at the moment isn't sufficient to address the needs of the city. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? Can we make sure that when we are discussing issues, it is in relation to the budget, and keep it as tight as possible, please? Thank you.
Just on a budget perspective, as you know, the Plan for Homes Capital Investment Fund at the moment is 10.9 million. We've spent 800,000. We've committed 6.3 million. and we've allocated to develop and support pipeline projects 3.88 million. So therefore, all approved Plan for Homes funding is either spent or committed. All I will do is I ruffled feathers by saying what more can we put in the budget for housing, but given current financial pressures, that was a challenge. By all means, throw in, a recommendation. I want the money to do it, but the money doesn't exist at the moment. So we're working with what we've got within Plan for Homes and bringing in those outside people as well to develop sites that we are able to do. I mean, I do think the budgetary impact of the Brownfield Land Release Fund is really key, because that is what we need in Plymouth, where we don't have copious numbers of green fields to easily build on, is necessary. And the fact that we're going to be bidding for more of that money is important, because at the end of the day, we've got to make that land attractive to developers to come in and build. So it's not getting the houses on the ground, but we're doing the preparatory work to do that, which I think is worth recognising.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my question, just to pick up on a note earlier, which I think is important with regards to the budget. My understanding, unless it's incorrect, is that any home that is left vacant for a period of time on an increasing scale sees significantly higher council tax charge. So from a budgetary point of view, we should be getting more. So it's not really an incentive, but it's a penalty to encourage landlords to bring their homes back. But an initiative, as has been discussed, is possibly how well we're policing that, and could there be some work done to identify those buildings and a conversation where there is monies available to perhaps help bring them back, which in turn would provide a greater housing stock. So that might be something picking up on previously. My question with regards to Councillor Smith and her portfolio is tackling poverty and child poverty. Clearly we're going through a cost of living crisis, and even those people that were relatively well off are feeling the financial pinch. I know last year I put money specifically into the for child poverty. Could Councillor Smith confirm what that money's been used for and what benefit it's resulted in, and whether that fund will be increased or maintained going forward, bearing in mind the severity of people probably more in poverty and less likely to get out than there's ever been? Thank you.
So just to respond on the council tax penalties bit, clearly that is what happens, and the disincentive to keep your property empty exists, and I think we should make as much as we can out of that, because we don't want empty properties. Whether that gets ring fenced to put back into the empty homes, that's, we'll have to look at that. But in terms of child poverty, you're right. Last year there was a £25,000 allocation. That is enabling us to direct funding towards the newly approved Child Poverty Action Plan, which is a 3-year plan. So that £25,000 is able to be rolled over. So we haven't had to spend it all this year. We're looking at how it is best going to tackle the action plan and work out the funding accordingly. So far, we've spent about 5,000 of that, because a lot of it is dependent. The plan was only confirmed at the end of last year, so we've got that opportunity then to allocate that funding according to that new plan. But we've been able to use that already towards the Christmas support packages that you will have seen the council delivered. We've just contributed towards the new uniform store crowdfunder, because one of the issues that the Child Poverty Working Group has talked a lot about is the cost of school uniform and the impact that has. And we've seen the statistics from the uniform store on how many families they've impacted. So we've recently just put in a chunk of money towards that, which has had agreement from everybody. And the good news about that is that doubles our money, because it's in a crowdfunder. So we haven't needed to spend 4,000. Our 2,000 is given that money. And then obviously we've used some of the money towards developing the plan that we're doing. We're also looking to backfill the child poverty oral health improvement project. So councillors will have seen that they were invited to contribute towards an oral health scheme, where year 2 children receive a book that teaches them, they get taught how to brush their teeth, and then they get a book. We've asked councillors to contribute towards that. Many councillors have done that, and they will get their name in a book. For the schools where the councillors haven't done that, the child poverty group is going to pay the remainder of that money, but clearly there will be no ward councillor allocated to that. That's because we felt that that was a really important scheme to deliver to every child in the city, dependent on whether or not their ward councillor was keen. There's also a number of other proposals that have been considered or rejected that we're working through. But as I said, this money can roll over to next year, which, to be fair, I think is actually of best value to the child poverty working group, because our plan has only just been put together and the rising cost of living is going to continually increase. But we have looked specifically at supporting things like the household support fund, or the discretionary housing payment, sorry, so where there are families particularly in need, making that accessible. But as you also know, the Child Poverty Action Group only meets 3 or 4 times a year, so spending the money is going to take time because we have to agree that together as a group.
Yeah, I go on record. I thank you for your answer, but I'm incredibly disappointed with that answer. I don't really understand that if money's been put aside and we all acknowledge that poverty and our most vulnerable are our most needy, yet there's a massive lag with distributing that money to give an immediate effect. And unless I've misunderstood, you're saying it's not been spent, but we'll roll it forward. That wasn't my original question. My original question was, what's it's been spent on, and are you going to have 25,000 afresh, or are you going to actually increase it to show more compassion and need? And with regards to, I received an email about oral care. I didn't participate. I didn't know that my name would be in a book. I didn't know it was a name and shame factor. But having been the instigator of putting 25,000 in that's not been allocated, I would have thought that's the very sort of reason that those monies would be put to use for immediate benefit, not by committee that we sit around for 12 months, not able to spend it. So my question remains, will the 25,000 be in again? So in effect, it's 50,000, or are you going to increase it further?
In short, it's not gone in this year because the budget situation is completely different to what it was last year. So it's great that it got put in last year. Congratulations on getting that in, but we're not in the same situation this year, as you know, Councillor Kelly. And so the fact that we are able to roll it over enables us to continue using that money as we reflect on the needs across the city. And at the end of the day, the Child Poverty Cabinet Group was who was given the money, and we have an action plan. So we have to spend that money against the action plan. And as I said, that action plan was only approved in October. So essentially, the money not spent for those first 6 months was because we were writing the new action plan, and we want to target that £25,000 to the output of that action plan rather than just spending it on other things that don't relate to that plan. So what we've decided as a group is that the best thing to do is to target it according to that plan, and I'm assuming in part that was what that money was given for, so that is why we're continuing, and the fact that we can roll it over enables us to continue delivering it for that plan. But as you know, this isn't the only source of income for us on these issues, and you know it's great that you gave it last year, but it unfortunately isn't going to be there this year, but clearly it would be my preference that it was.
Councillor Lang, please.
Thank you. My question is also on child poverty. It's about free school meal take-up. Excuse me. Again, we know the Child Poverty Group has been driving some work on this, but we still have a significant number of families who are not taking up free school meal provision, which they're entitled to, which has a knock-on effect for their household budget, but also has a knock-on effect for school budgets, which I appreciate it won't necessarily have a direct impact on the budget we're discussing today, but it brings money into the city in terms of pupil premium. So I just wondered what thought has been given to any kind of innovative way. You know, we've tried various things through the Child Poverty Group, but working with schools to try to drive free school meal take up because of all the attendant benefits, not least that those children will get a hot meal during their school day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. So in terms of free school meal policy, that the only bit that overlaps with me is where we would talk about that in the Child Poverty Action Plan. What I can tell you, though, is what we've done with the Household Support Fund to enable families in those situations, because that does come under my portfolio. So there's been 3 rounds of the Household Support Fund from October 2021 to now, and we've been awarded just over £2 million each time. And as you probably also know, different rounds have been focused in different areas. So round one was specifically focused on support for free school meal families during the school holidays in the form of food vouchers. And in that round, we provided 45,000 nearly vouchers, or the kind of quantity that we'd be dealing with, to a total of 1.845 million or 1.846 million. So that has continued, and that was the largest chunk of that round one. Round two was different. As you might know, we had to give some specific support to pensioners. That was what the government asked us to do. So there was a decrease in the value that we could spend on households with children, and what that looked like in reality was a reduction in the £15 a week to £13 a week, but we still were able to distribute, again, £1.5 million to those families. Round three doesn't have any ring fencing, so we've had a lot more scope to do what we think we needed to do, but we were told to support households in the most need. So actually this time around, we have looked at those who aren't necessarily covered by other cost of living payments, because not everybody falls into those brackets. However, using the food security and Plymouth research report from last year, we have identified that families with children on low income, including single parent households, remain within that priority group. So that support has continued. And so, yeah, the allocation of free school meal vouchers to those children continues, and they will be supplied have been supplied already for October half term and Christmas, and that will continue February and Easter, and that will again be to the value of £13. So it doesn't directly answer your question, but it answers it in respect to my budget areas, if that's okay.
Mentally, yeah.
Yeah, so I take your point about portfolios, but we are talking about tackling child poverty, and I think free school meal take-up is actually key to that. So maybe, Chair, it might be something we could maybe think about, some kind of recommendation just about putting minds back on to trying to increase take-up on this, because of the impact it has on family budgets and feeding children on a daily basis. Maybe it won't be directed at you, but, and as I missed most of the education session yesterday, maybe I would have raised it there if I had been there. Thanks.
Yeah, we're happy to note that, and so we'll have a discussion tomorrow afternoon and put the final form of words together for the presentation thereafter. Councillor Kelly, yeah, bear in mind we've got 4 minutes left.
It's a
of this
quickie.
phone.
So today's meeting is about budget and costs.
Can I stop there a minute?
I haven't got Sally down, so
I thought Chair had eyed me, but obviously you've had it.
yeah, so she put her
I think okay, yeah.
I'll be quick. This is a budget setting meeting. We've just heard that 25,000 can't go in for child poverty. What causes a lot of budget pressure and what's in the budget with regards to travellers and encampments? Can you tell us whether you have put money in, if it's more or less than last year, or is that just an on cost? And what have you done to mitigate? Because that's one of the areas that people feel very strongly that they're paying increased council tax, we're paying to get rid of our own waste, yet we pick up the bill as local taxpayers quite considerably, especially in the summer months.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. That particular bit of my portfolio was not one of the topics that was requested on us to discuss in the budget today, so we're really happy to give that information subsequently, but it didn't come under any of those sections. And whether you disagree with that, I don't have the information. So I understand how it relates to my portfolio, but the specific answer you're asking for is not part of what we've prepared for today's scrutiny, because it wasn't on the list of topics.
Through you, Chair, if I could have that, because clearly there's a budget implication that can be quite severe when we're talking about tens of thousands. That is a significant on cost that there is no direct benefit to the local taxpayer.
All right, just to interject, I think what we do is we get a written response thereafter. Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it very brief. Nice to eventually be able to speak to you, Rebecca. Can I talk about the council tax support scheme? Could you tell me the last time that you re-looked at it? That's the first question. Especially we're finding more. Sorry, that's okay. That's just so you know. We're finding more working people in poverty. You've heard from many councillors today about our vulnerable people in the city. When we look at the Equalities Assessments Pack, assessment, sorry, there hasn't been a lot put in there, especially when we're also looking at a rise in council tax and umpteen other things. So first question is, when did we last look at the scheme, please?
My understanding is that sits with Councillor Shea and not me in terms of the specific scheme. I can talk to you about what we've done on the tackling poverty side of it. So in answer to your actual question, I don't have the answer to that, but I can get that to you. What I can talk to you about, though, is the other things you've asked about, which relate more directly to my portfolio. So I'm happy to, if you
This
want.
is just the council tax discretionary welfare fund.
So that was part of our cabinet discussion last week, but it's not my paper, so I wasn't the one responsible for actually looking at it. But I can tell you we looked at it at cabinet last week. So, but in terms of the details, that sits with Councillor Shea. But I can tell you about. I can talk to you at other points about adults who are in need of support within the council tax system, if that's okay.
Helpful, thank you.
So going back to the answer I gave about household support funds, some of that has been directly put towards single adults who are working and working couples and things, because they don't always come in under the other schemes, and we recognise that. So energy, help with energy, particularly through PEC, and other schemes available through Citizens Advice.
You just explain.
PEC, Plymouth Energy Community, and Citizens Advice Plymouth have been providing help towards energy bills, and so the cohort that you've just described would be eligible to engage on that front. The other thing that I have had responsibility for this year has been on the council tax rebate schemes, which you'll be familiar with is what the government gave us to do. And one of the things I was very keen to ensure we did was to make sure that we supported as many families and individuals as possible, and we extended that to cover everybody who's in receipt of council tax support. So initially, as you know, that was everyone in band A to D got a payment. We then had a discretionary pot of nearly £1 million, and essentially we distributed that so anybody who receives any support got an additional payment, including those in larger properties, because in some cases that would have been a single person living on their own who might be elderly or whatever. So if you were in receipt of disability, dementia, single person discounts, you received a top up, and then everybody in A to D who received council tax support did as well. But I mean, I'm really keen on ensuring that we maximise the council tax support scheme because it exists and we should be helping people. So you've got my commitment to keep talking about that at least. But what I have done is try to make sure that money goes to those who really need it.
Thank you. I won't ask a supplementary because I know that your time is clicking, but once everybody leaves the room, then if we could have a conversation on that one, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. I believe also from information received that the council tax support scheme will be discussed in full council on Monday. Am I correct on that? Just for information. Obviously we're running very quick on time. Councillor Poyser, if you want to be very, very quick in any response, be very quick. And I mean a matter of minutes, please.
Very quick, thank you, Chair. Just building on Councillor Hayden and Councillor Lang's point around support to households. Obviously, there's budgetary pressures there. What I'm concerned about is, while we're focused on the budget, it's about the barriers to accessing those particular funds as well. Are we mindful about trying to remove some of those barriers, given the pressures elsewhere within the services around customer services? It's about access to those funds. Have we actually made sure we've captured that and recorded that? Maybe that's part of a recommendation that we could put forward with Councillor Lang. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually think that would be a brilliant question to ask on Monday at full council, because that is the sort of thing that will come up in that debate, because I've asked exactly that sort of question in the past. How do we make sure that everybody in the city knows that if they're entitled to it, this is available? So I think you make a really good point, and I think it's worth following up.
That therefore brings session 5 to an end. We'd like to thank the councillors and officers alike for their time. So we've got an adjournment now for 10-15 minutes. If we can make sure we're back in by about 1:45 to enter session 6, please.